beauty that we see really is dependent upon who we are. And because of that, I can show you a picture like this. And some of you may find it endearing, while others may find it cute, and others they aren't interested at all. But for me, it absolutely just makes me melt. Because this is a photograph of my oldest daughter holding our youngest when she was just 1 day old. And this picture, it was captured 2 weeks ago. And beauty is interesting. It's universal, yet at the same time, it's unique. And because of that, I think Miss Piggy from the Muppets can say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And therefore, from time to time, you may need to give a stupid or misinformed beholder a black eye. And I'm a photographer. I'm interested in trying to create images that are authentic, that are alive, that are beautiful in both universal and unique ways, whether it's a photograph of my daughter or of a sunrise on a beach or of a famous celebrity like this. I like how Helen Keller put it. She said that the most beautiful things in this world, they can't be seen or even touched. They must be felt. And I think the converse is true as well, that how we feel, it affects what we see. And about 12 years ago or so, I wasn't feeling very well at all. To make a long story short, I was skateboarding and hit by a car, which led to a number of different health issues. And I couldn't do many of the things I enjoyed, like surfing or biking or hiking or walking very much. And at this time, really for me, I was just completely broken. I was cracked. I was undone. Because I had defined myself by what I could and couldn't do. And at this stage in life, I remember molehills, they were like mountaintops. Small curbs were just impassable. Mountaintops, they were impassable in just a completely different way. And it was in this time in my life that a friend of mine was having a bachelor party. It was a backpacking trip up in the eastern Sierras in these mountains. And when I heard that, I thought, great, another thing I can't do. And then I found out that the first night was car camping. Well, I could do that. I could make it from the car to the campground, and I went, and there I was. And it was fun, but I remember that night crawling into my tent. And I was there in my tent, and it was dark, and I was alone. And I thought about the next day when everyone would go on up into the mountains, and I would be left behind. And at that time in my life, I was broken, and I was just searching for something. I was groping for something to stay afloat. And my father, in his wisdom, gave me a camera. This camera, a small little camera. And that camera, somehow it became a passport to get out into the world and to explore. And somehow that camera, it did something to me. When you have pain, any type of pain, let's say like you break a toe. The point of pain is that you focus in on that toe so you can protect and heal it. But when you have pain all the time or a lot of pain, there is so much self-focus, it's hard to just stave or fight it off. But somehow the camera, it started this journey where I could do that. And even if I didn't have the camera, I was thinking about something else. I was noticing different things. And I was living in Los Angeles at the time. And I remember at this time, because of the camera, I saw perhaps one of the most beautiful things I had ever seen. And to this day, I hold that to be true. It was a palm tree, a Los Angeles palm tree. Yet it wasn't an ordinary palm tree. It was one that was growing up out of a rain gutter. And I imagined that palm seed being washed down into the gutter, and there that seed was in the gutter. And it was looking up through the cracks, and it pushed. It pushed past concrete and metal and traffic and smog, and it was reaching for the light. And for me, it was like I saw myself, or I saw who I wanted to be. And somehow Somehow I was changed. It set me on this journey to capture pictures like this, whether it was this tree in the backyard of the home where I grew up, that tree that I climbed so many times, or whether it was getting up early to capture that still moment on the lake, or just to capture that path or that pier that led out towards the sea. See, I was on a journey, and this camera, it was like it was inviting me. It was becoming a mentor and a friend. It was almost dragging me along to these different experiences, and I would hold it up to my eye. And when I did that, I discovered that beauty, it can be found in the most unexpected places. Like maybe my sister just standing next to an open window. Or my daughters and their friends standing on a local beach in an uncontrived and natural way. Or perhaps one of my colleagues who I teach with standing in front of his office wall. And this really led me to understand that the camera, somehow it's about savoring life. It slows or stops life. It savors those moments that otherwise would have just slipped away. Like that moment when my daughter, she jumped off the side of the pool in Costa Rica, and she jumped with just such complete abandon. And then she landed in the swimming pool, swam towards me with her eyes wide open and that big smile on her face. It captured that moment when she used to swim with her eyes open before goggles. And that moment, it was savored. And that led me to want to create perfect pictures. I wanted to perfect my pictures, whether with the camera or in post-production after the fact. I wanted to somehow grow and get better and make my pictures strong and real and alive. And again, it was like the camera, it was dragging me around, taking me different places. And one such place that it led me to was to meeting up with the singer and songwriter Seal. And there I was, in his home in Beverly Hills. And we were talking about life and music and photography, and he said something to me that I thought was absolutely profound. So profound that I snapped this picture moments after he said it, just to have a visual snapshot to remember those words, to savor those words. Here's what he said. He said, when I shoot with digital capture, I look for the mistake. When I shoot with film, I embrace it. And this isn't about digital versus film. It's about something much more. It's about this idea that sometimes it's imperfection. Sometimes it's the flaw that makes the frame. Sometimes it's the scar. The scar which is the most beautiful, profound, and strong. And so then in my pictures, in all sorts of pictures, whether it's a family portrait or something else, I'm trying to discover what is the flaw. And rather than creating a family portrait where everyone's wearing the same jeans and white t-shirt and pretend smile, maybe I want something that is imperfectly beautiful or beautiful in imperfect ways. It's almost like that pause between the notes. Not everyone is looking, and I didn't say cheese. And it's about capturing those moments, those moments when someone's defense system is down. When we hold a camera up, we project, we try to protect, we withdraw. And it's about trying to capture something where someone is maybe vulnerable. Like this photograph of Jack O'Neill, the inventor of the wetsuit. There he is, sitting on his front porch, looking out towards the sea. Or maybe this photograph of This photograph of Kelly Slater. It's Kelly Slater, the 10-time world champion. He's not on the stage with his arms up, but it's intimate, authentic, and close. Or this photo of my daughter, Annika. I think there's beauty even in sickness. Here she had a fever. We were going to go walk to feed and pet some horses, and she didn't want to walk. So her grandma, my mom, decided that, or said that she would drag her along in one of those little red wagons. So they loaded it up with blankets and pillows, and we were off. And as we were walking, the sun set, and it was so beautiful. And I walked over to her, and I was talking, and I had my camera, and she looked back. And I think it was because of the sickness. Had she not been sick, what would she have done? Stuck out her tongue, held up her hand to block the picture. But there was connection there. And sometimes a connection is even more profound. Sometimes the flaw is even bigger than a fever. Sometimes it's a loss of a different kind. I like how W.S. Merwin once wrote, Your absence, it runs through me like thread through a needle, and everything that I do is stitched with its color. And this is a portrait of a friend, a mentor who has since passed away. You know, beauty, it isn't about newness, about something that is pristine. It's about the passage of time and the things that happen along the way. Here's another photograph of a mentor and friend. And as we were talking, he was telling me about the cancer that he has in one of his eyes. And he reached up to point to that eye. And he said, if I go blind in this eye, you won't see me complaining. I'll still take pictures with the other. And this is coming from someone who defines his life, his livelihood by photography. I once heard it said that silence, it's a prerequisite for the profound. And I agree. You know, sometimes it's just about being quiet. Like with this picture down in Costa Rica, one of my best friends and his son, they were out playing in the surf, and in between the waves, I captured this frame without asking them, again, to smile, just capturing that moment. Or moments later when they were on the beach, just sitting side by side. And sometimes when you're quiet, sometimes when you minimize your own voice, something else can happen. So a picture isn't just unique or particular, but maybe it's universal or profound, so that it's not just about these two people, but it's about fatherhood. It's about a father and a son side by side. And you know, one of the ways we do this as photographers is by compose. And a lot of times you compose with a rule, but I say compose with poetry in mind. What poets do is they leave things out. The picture isn't perfect. It isn't clear. And it's what is left out that is sometimes most interesting. And sometimes by not including everything, we're drawn into one aspect of a frame. Or other times, some pictures like this portrait of another world champion surfer, Tom Curran, rather than that direct, straightforward portrait, it's almost maybe a little bit pensive or dreamlike. It was Edgar Allan Poe who said, those who dream by day, they are cognizant of things which escape those who only dream by night. And you know, sometimes it's not about getting perfect focus. Sometimes there isn't any focus at all, and it's just completely dreamlike. Those who dream by day, they are cognizant, they are aware, they are in tune, which escape those who only dream by night. You know, many times it's a question of what not to include, like with this frame here, not including what he's looking at outside of the frame, or perhaps it's recomposing, so it's the same person but a different type of portrait. Now it's about his hands. Other times it's about changing your position, your vantage point. Here, a lower camera position, positioning the subject in the center of the Brooklyn Bridge so that he's blocking out those 30 tourists standing on the bridge. Or just moments later, moving off axis, so now it's the cables which are blocking. It's trying to figure out what not to include, and sometimes it's about life as it passes by, and trying not to include all the clutter, but creating some order about this moment that would otherwise have been lost. And still other times, it's about having some sort of preconceived idea. So when you're in this small little village in Mexico, you're not taking pictures of the village, but the subject, its color, and that's what you're trying to capture. And with that idea in mind, you know what pictures not to take. Aristotle once said, the aim of art, it isn't to show the outward appearance of things, but their inner significance. Art is about excavation. It's about digging deep. And with photography, many times to create good pictures, meaningful pictures, they have to mean something to you, like this portrait of a man who's been my mentor for the last 20 years. He's taught me so much about what it means to be a father and a man. Other times it's about trying to create a picture which isn't just about the person, but tells us something about who someone actually is. It gives us insight. You know, sometimes a camera can help us see more clearly. Other times maybe it's about the eyes. The eyes can say so much. Still other times, maybe it's about a posture or a gesture or just that subtle smile on his face and in his eyes. And so there I was in my tent, and I wasn't smiling very much at all. It was dark and it was cold. And there was a crack, there was a gap, there was an opening in the tent. And I could look out and I could see the stars, and you know it's always the darkest and the coldest just before dawn. And then the sun rose. And the sun rose, and the sun came into my tent, and I could tell it was illuminating the mountains outside. And eventually I unzipped that tent flap, and there were those mountains, those damn mountains, those mountains that had kept me up that night. This was the day that I was to be left behind. I wanted to be like that gutter palm. I wanted to reach out and somehow reach towards the light, but I didn't have the physical ability or strength to do it on my own. But then, one of my friends, he started to rally the guys and said, "You're coming with us." And I said, "That's great, but wheelchairs and backpacking, it doesn't really mix." And these guys, they began to build something. It became known as the Chariot of Pain. They took a lawn chair and some poles and rope and duct tape. And they proceeded to carry me up this mountain, a few thousand vertical feet. I was like the Pharaoh of the John Muir Trail. And we would pass other hikers. I didn't know what else to do but to wave. And we got up to the top, and it was amazing. And then once we were back down, we took this picture to mark that moment. And you know, for me, that was the day, that was the moment when my healing, it began. The ordinary all of a sudden was extraordinary. The mundane, it was magnificent. And you know, the extraordinary is there. It's just a matter of whether or not you're willing to look for it. Are you willing to believe in wonder and look for it every day? And so what about you? I think this pursuit of beauty, it begins with a few simple steps. There is beauty to behold, and to neglect noticing it, to neglect valuing it and pursuing it, well, it deserves a punch in the eye, as Miss Piggy implied. You know, life is too wonderful. Time is too short. And you know, this isn't about niceness and roses and sunsets. It's about much more than that. It's about fight. It was Dylan Thomas who said, rage against the dying of the light. All good art, it requires some sort of fight. And beauty isn't about perfection or the pristine. It is much, much more than that. It was Leonard Cohen who said, "Ring the bell. Ring the bell that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There are cracks. There are cracks in everything." That's how the light gets in. And at least for me in my life, that's what I've discovered so far. So are you willing? Ring the bell. Forget for a moment perfection. There are cracks, gaps, openings, apertures, brokenness in everything. Pursue, celebrate, and embrace that. Because that is how the light gets in. Thank you.